حسين 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 يا حسين صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
وعجل فرجهم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد.
وآل محمد. Inshallah ta'ala, with our dear Sheikh's permission, inshallah we have final question answer session and then we close. I have a couple on the phone, and if anyone has extra, inshallah we'll accommodate for that. So the first question we have, you have a microphone? Oh, you do. Okay. Here we go. The Imams had very high moral standards. For example, showing kindness to those who would curse them or insult them. Now, how can we live up to these standards, especially in today's society where someone might take advantage of that kind of behavior?
Of course, I think, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, I think when covering the topic of using them as role models in my short talk, that would be, of course, the best kind of approach. One of the things that we have to remember is we all have anger, and we all have that instinctive within ourselves. But Islam teaches us to suppress our anger and use it only at a time where we know that the effects of that are going to be good and positive. Anger is not bad all the time. Sometimes a person does need to be angry and react. But to what extent, to what level, and because of what? Because of road rage, because someone beeped their horn at you, or because someone said something insulting to you and you need to retaliate with something worse than that? No, that's not the case. But you also can't be someone who is a pushover, someone who is used as a doormat, and not somehow defend yourself, or somehow, of course, make sure that your honor is not, of course, affected. And so balance in this is very, very important. We all know examples from our Imam and how they would be insulted. Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, someone saying to them, Baqar, Baqar means cow, and then Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, the reply that he gives is, no, that's not the name that my parents gave me. You know, of course, things are going to be said to you, and of course, you need to have already prepared yourself beforehand in, if such a situation was to occur, how are you going to activate your anger control? That's very, very important. And we can learn this from our Imams, preparing ourselves for any kind of situation where we automatically switch on the Imams in our minds and what they would do in this kind of situation and act upon that.
All right, Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Yes, indeed, when we look back to the lives of our Imams, it helps us channel our anger in the most appropriate situation. So, inshallah ta'ala, as we look back and reflect, we can have the answer prepared, just as our Sheikh mentioned. Next question is, I've always felt that the shahadat of Imam Hasan Al Askari had been forgotten and rarely discussed in majalis. Why is that the case?
Yes, unfortunately, we can see that there are some of our Imams that even general Shia don't know much about. Imam Muhammad al Jawad, Imam Ali al Hadi, Imam Hasan al Askari. You know, not much light is shed on them usually, and even people don't have that level of enthusiasm in learning about them and their life. But it's very, very important for us to make sure that we pay attention to each of our Imams. I'm not going to say equally, because in the case of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he surpasses everything and everyone. In our case, even when it comes to commemorating of Imam Hussein and what happened, it's even more than Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. We don't have arba'in for the Holy Prophet, we have arba'in for Imam Hussein. But that doesn't mean that we overlook the remaining Imams or not have that much understanding of their lives, and not, of course, highlight the events related to them, whether it be their birthday anniversary or their martyrdom anniversary.
All right. Yes. Jazakallah khair. Inshallah, we can look back, reflect on each of their examples, each of their cases, and inshallah, in that way, try and implement as well. Next question is: most Muslims are Sunni. Is it a correct argument that Sunni sheikhs use to say that Sunnis are on the right path and the others are not? And what does the Quran say about this particular answer?
Well, if we were to look at the Quran and look at quantity, the Quran always condemns quantity. أكثرهم للحق كارهون. Majority of people hate the truth. قليل من عبادي الشكور. A minute number of my servants are very thankful. So the overall rule of thumb in the Holy Quran is majority is bad, minority is good. So that's a very weak argument, that because the majority are Sunnis, that means that we need to be with the majority. No, that's most definitely not the case. Otherwise, Islam would not have came about in the first place. Majority of people in Mecca were polytheists, and that happened even during the early years of Islam as well, which is why the Holy Prophet had to make that migration. So there was never the case throughout the history of the majority being the right and the minority being the wrong. Even in the case of Islam, we can say, well, the majority of people in the world are Christian. We should even abandon Islam. If we use the principle of follow the majority and never the minority, then of course that means that we need to convert to Christianity. What we need to always know is the haqq. As the hadith says, اعرف الحق تعرف أهله. Know the truth and you will know the people who are with the truth. And as we know, حق مع, that's the Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. I think that would be the quickest but most damaging answer that can be given.
Yes. Alhamdulillah, no doubt. Jazakallah. Actually, thinking of a somewhat related question. Our brothers from the Ahlus Sunnah, I think majority of people would agree when it comes to advancing and propagating Islam, particularly amongst the non-Muslim world, they're a lot more successful than we are. I think so. I guess, are there things that we can look at and maybe reflect on how they?
Everything and everyone has good sides and bad sides. Which streets are cleaner, Sydney or where we are from? Even though al-nadafatu min al-iman, cleanliness is a sign of faith. Where is more structure and more order and more respect to law and more even respect to people around us? Where is there more truthfulness, especially when it comes to business and shopping and things like that? The one thing that is usually said to us when we travel go down that way is be careful when you go and you want to buy something because they'll rip you off. Be careful when you go into a taxi because the taxi will rip you off. So there are good sides to everything and everyone. There are also bad sides to everything and everyone. When it comes to Ahlus Sunnah, yes, they have good qualities that us Shia also need to be implementing. Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam have spoken so much about Salatul Jama'ah, right? But unfortunately, we don't pay that much attention in general. Ahlul Bayt have spoken so much about Salatul Jumu'ah, but we don't pay that attention. So we have all of these within our teachings, but unfortunately, due to, for whatever reasons, we overlook certain things and we prioritize certain other things. Even mass murderers and serial killers also had good sides. There are certain serial killers, they say that they were the best father figure for their children, right? But they, of course, ended up killing many, many innocent people. That's not, again, the rule of thumb when it comes to what the haqq, what the truth is. It's not how someone looks or how rich they are or how clean they are or any of these things or advancement and technology. No, it's a matter of what the true principle is.
One other question, because you mentioned the congregational prayer. Do you think congregational prayer in the household would be a step forward, more prevalent practice in the masjid?
Yeah, well, of course, we have to remember that the requirements for Imam of Jama'ah in Shi'i fiqh is different to the requirements for Imam of Jama'ah in Sunni fiqh. That's an important point. With Imam of Jama'ah in the veracity and the level of, we need to know that, for example, he is a person of integrity, has high akhlaq, is not someone who, for example, does this or does that. In Sunni fiqh, the requirement of adala or righteousness, inner righteousness, is absent. So that's, of course, one point. But yes, in answering your question, instilling that culture in the family is very, very important. And of course, that would reflect on how this person starts to practice this very important sunnah his or her public life as well.
Ahsant. Final question is, where in the Quran is it directly mentioned of Imam al-Mahdi as one of the important events in history, like the Salihun will rule on the earth? So there should be somewhere in the Quran mentioning Imam al-Mahdi.
So explicitly mentioning? No, there's no explicit mentioning of any of our imams. And that's one of the arguments that if imama, I have a whole lecture on this, it's online, if you want to see it. If imama and Imam Ali is so important, why is it not mentioned in the Quran? So explicitly Ali ibn Abi Talib as that name, no, he's not mentioned in the Quran. There are other people who don't have that much of an important as far as our theology, but are mentioned in the Quran, like Zaid, for example, and the story of Zaid and whatnot. Prophet Isa alayhi salam is mentioned more than even Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. 25 times, Rasulullah is only mentioned 5 times. Prophet Ibrahim is mentioned way more than that. Prophet Musa is mentioned way more than that. There are even cases of people who are completely irrelevant to us, but are also mentioned in the Holy Quran. Surah of Muhammad, very short. Surah Al-Baqarah goes on to 2.5 juz's. Again, we can't use that kind of analogy to come up with a theological conclusion. Implicitly, yes, there are many verses in the Holy Quran that implicitly refer to the righteous people inheriting the earth at the end of time. And of course, that would you be used usually in the context of Imam al-Mahdi ajalullah ta'ala faraj al-sharif.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
Allahumma salli.
Inshallah ta'ala, that concludes our program for tonight. And just to end, I'd like to invite our dear brother Jahangir to recite Ziyarat, and afterwards brother Asghar Abbas and Ali Haider to recite Dua Faraj. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا محمد بن عبد الله،